Yes.
Uh, Okay, I will call roll now. Councilmember Frost.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Victoric.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Villar.
Councilmember Villar, are you on the line? If you'd unmute yourself, please.
Hmm. Probably should have called him first.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Councilmember Villar. Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Federico.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. City Attorney, do we have a need for a closed session?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have one item this evening. It's a conference with legal counsel as a result of anticipated litigation due to the significant exposure to litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D2. We have one matter to discuss.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments for that item?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right, then we are adjourned to closed session until 6 p.m. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Dana Point City Council meeting for January 19th, 2021. We are now reconvened, and a quick administrative note before we kick off the meeting. Councilmember Villar is joining us via telephone, so if you see the camera on him, he is here with us, but not physically in the room. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. That'll be led by Mayor Pro Tem Joe Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If everyone could please rise if you're able, face the flag, place your hand over your heart, and join me in honoring the greatest symbol of freedom in the world. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Miller. We have some presentations and proclamations tonight. But before we start that, and she'll be joining me up here, I would first like to introduce newly promoted Captain Kirsten Monteleone, who was recently promoted from the rank of lieutenant to captain and OCSD. Normally, that would mean we would lose her and she wouldn't get to be our police chief anymore. But because of some reorganization at the sheriff's department, she gets to be Captain Monteleone and we get to keep her. So we're very, very thankful for that and congratulations. And Captain Monteleone, if you'd join me up here. And the first recognition we're going to do tonight is for Mr. Tom Whitman, who's been a volunteer in our VIPS program in police services for 12 plus years, and he is retiring from that volunteer service, and we'd very much like to thank him and appreciate him for that. For those of you who don't know much about what the VIPS program is, our volunteers in police service are a group of, right now, about 15, but anywhere from 15 to 20 dedicated volunteers who do everything from vehicle patrols around town, home checks. They supplement the police services at big events. They do all of our special events. They do a lot of work down in the office, administrative and clerical work for police services. And thanks to Tom, they are most visibly the bike patrol that you see down at the beaches in the harbor. And with that, Captain Monteleone, if you'd like to speak.
I think I can just, I have a really loud voice. So Tom, you started with us in 2008. You've been with us for 12 plus years, 2,800 hours logged for your service. That's incredible. You were the forefather that started our bike patrol. You trained all of our people that do bike patrol. You've done parking citations, graffiti removal, signage. You've been our front guy for everything. Every time we've had a special event, you're the first guy to volunteer. You were going to be sorely, sorely missed. And I thank you dearly for your service and your dedication to the city and to the Orange County Sheriff's Department. So thank you very much. We have some things for you. First, we have Whitman Way, the Dana Point Street sign for you. And then this is a plaque in honor of you to volunteer Tom. It's Walter Tom Whitman, correct? A distinguished member of the Dana Point Police Services volunteer program in recognition of 12 years of dedication, service to the city of Dana Point, logging 2670 hours. And your retirement date was November, so I appreciate everything that you've done. Can I shake your hand? Okay. Thank you so much. Absolutely. I think the mayor's going to present you with something, and then we would love for you to speak.
We want nothing more than you to say a few words, except we're not quite done yet. I've got for you a certificate of recognition to Mr. Tom Whitman for volunteers in police services, presented by the City Council of the City of Dana Point, and recognizing your over 12 years of dedicated service from December 2008 to November 2020, contributing more than 2,670 hours while assisting as bicycle patrol for volunteers in police support of Dana Point Police Services. Dated this 19th day of January 2021. And last but not least, we've got the City of Dana Point tile that goes out to all city employees whenever they leave here. So we want you to have this same keepsake that all of our city employees get. On behalf of everybody here, not just police services and the staff, but all of our residents and the probably thousands of visitors to the harbor from all over the county and the country that you've helped during all your time here. Thank you very much. You can turn, whatever most comfortable.
I promise not to take long, but I did want to say some things. I really feel like I should be presenting you guys with something, not the way it's going, because it's been such a pleasure. It's been a real privilege and a pleasure. I've enjoyed every minute of it. Over the years, when people would ask me, do you really like doing that? My typical answer was, no, if they paid me to do this, I'd be embarrassed. And it's the truth. I just met some wonderful people in the sheriff's department and the city staff, the residents, and just thoroughly enjoyed it. And I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me to do this, and love Dana Point. Thank you very much.
Please. Hold that up your side. Can we come out here together?
Yeah.
We're gonna take two. We're all smiling. 1, 2, 3. Can you take that time down a little bit? Oh, that's awesome. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you very much.
Take care of yourself.
I did miss saying one other thing too. Everybody was most helpful, but Bernie and Jill were just super. They're the kind of the glue that held the VIPS program together. And I mean, they were always there when we needed them. And I love them both to death.
And they both wanted to be here, and they send their regards.
Tell them I said hello and thinking about
I 100%.
it. And I'll drop by once in a while.
Please do, Tom. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So I can get out of here now with all of this stuff.
Do you want to put these back in?
No, I think we can do that thing. That way I have to get rid of them. All right. All right, thank you.
Hi, Jack. So for those of you out there, we're bringing back another program. We're bringing back a program tonight that we haven't kind of done in quite some time. Tonight we're going to recognize Jack Loconsolo as our Volunteer of the Quarter. And once a month, we'll bring either a volunteer, a business, or a staff member up here who's made a unique or overwhelming contribution to the city, and we'll recognize them. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, Jack Loconsolo from Jack's is going to be our Volunteer of the Quarter. And I'm pretty certain everyone watching up there knows Jack. And if you don't, I know they know your restaurant, Jack. What many of you out there might not know is much about our senior program over at the community center. And even before COVID, particularly before COVID, we regularly have seniors through our partnership with AgeWell Senior Services who have lunch at the senior center. And for them, it's more than just having lunch, but it's social interaction, nutrition, financially. It helps for many people who are on fixed incomes. And when COVID hit, we had to close the community center. Not only did we have to try to adapt that program, but our staff members over there recognized we also had much more need and much more demand for that program. So cue Jack, who reaches out to the city when restaurants, at the same time, restaurants and businesses and all of us are trying to figure out how to adapt to COVID, particularly restaurant owners trying to figure out how to deal with, at first, I guess it was sanitization, then it was be closed, then how do you pay your bills and keep your staff, and what do you do with your lease, right, Jack? While he should have been or could have been overwhelmed with all those things, Jack reached out to the city and asked how he could help us or the city. And because some really smart staff members here, we figured out what better way than through food. And so since April of 2020, Jack has been donating 50 meals a week to our senior program. I'm talking just a little bit more about the impact of that in a second, Jack. But for that, we would like to recognize you as our volunteer of the quarter. And this certificate of recognition says, Jack Loconsolo from Jack's Restaurant, our volunteer of the quarter for December 2020. The city of Dana Point takes great pleasure in featuring Jack's Restaurant, located at 24462 Del Prado Ave in Dana Point, and extends our congratulations on being named Dana Point Featured Volunteer of the Quarter by Mayor Jamie Federico. On behalf of the city of Dana Point City Council, Jack has graciously volunteered over 50 meals a week since April 2020 to senior services, dated this 19th day of January 2021. So that's for you, Jack. And that impact goes way beyond the individual 50 meals that you gave and the impact that had, but it really inspired the staff to improve what's going on over there at the community center. And in addition to all the extra seniors, we've been giving food to people that way beyond just the seniors over there, and just about anyone who has a need, they're getting food over there, and it's been a fantastic program. So thank you so very much. Jack's been here, Jack's Restaurant's been open since 1997. Like I said, everyone knows Jack and your continued commitment, but particularly right now, thank you so much. We very much appreciate it.
You know, I just wanted to say, when it comes to Dana Point, the only thing more contagious than COVID is the volunteer spirit of Dana Point. It's phenomenal. And the gentleman that was here before me, and you know, in spite of all those things you described that all of our local businesses have been going through, I was able to do that because of the outpouring of support that I got from my customers, and those are residents of Dana Point. So, you know, as always, we're all on the same team, and I'm just happy to be in a position to be able to turn around and pass it on. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks and congratulations to Tom and Jack. This brings us to the reading of the ordinance titles. Madam Clerk, are there any ordinance titles to read?
Mr. Mayor, I have no ordinance titles this evening. Thank
That
you.
is fantastic. That brings us to our consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, the public, or staff request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Are there any items to be removed from the public?
No, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Are there any items to be removed from staff?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we would like to pull item number 8 for separate discussion.
All right. And then are there any items to be removed from council? I will move the balance.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And
Aye.
there it is. All right. That passes. Madam Public Clerk, are there any public comments?
Sorry, no, Mr. Mayor, I do not have any public comments this evening.
Okay, and item number 8, pulled by staff. Do we want Captain Monteleone, or is the city manager gonna? Captain Monteleone, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm going to be presenting statistics for the Dana Point Police Services update for the months of December and November of 2020. The traffic statistics will be the 2 months prior. So we're going to be going over November 2020, Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. So as you can see, the only thing that brings our attention is our larceny, which is all of our thefts. We did have a large amount of auto theft, not particularly auto thefts, but thefts from automobiles, catalytic converters included, through November and December. I also was a victim of my catalytic converter and my vehicle being stolen within a matter of 3 months in my city. So it is a crime that's all over California as we know it. Recently, we had our directed enforcement team set up in Dana Point in an undercover operation, and they actually did apprehend one of these rings that was operating out of Los Angeles. But unfortunately, one gets arrested and another pops up. So we're doing our diligence to try to make an impact on these crimes, because they definitely do affect us personally. So our Part 2 crimes, as you can see, the only thing that I notice again is going to be miscellaneous violations, and that ranges from, drunken publics, minor misdemeanor crimes. Okay, for December Part 1 and Part 2 crimes, again, our thefts are something that we see quite often, and generally in Dana Point, historically, that is going to be what we see is going to be our biggest problem is thefts. I mean, our assaults we did have 2 assaults in December, and we had no robberies, no rapes, no homicides. So those are all good statistics. Part 2 crimes for December, again, our thefts are going to be our misdemeanor violations. Those are going to be a lot of the citations that our deputies work on proactively. So October traffic statistics, I often do get complaints from citizens about traffic enforcement, and we've definitely made a huge impact to make a difference in our traffic index reports. As you can see in October, the difference between 2019 and 2020 is vastly different. We went from 36 to 197 for non-hazardous citations that we've issued. The year prior for hazardous was 64, and this past October it went up to 129. So we're trying to make a difference as far as our traffic index goes. November traffic stats for 2020, again, you're going to see a large increase in statistics. That is duly, as we tried to do in October, is make a difference. The more sites that we write, unfortunately, generally the least amount of accidents we have. So I was asked to do a report on the Strands parking lot and the Strands community. As you can see, we did a 6-month study of how many calls for service we had. So total calls for service in the Strands parking lot, which is property of Orange County Parks, but we do the policing for that, was 26 calls. 18 of those were noise disturbances. 4 were reckless driving. We actually had 1 crime in there, and that was a theft. 1 fireworks call, and then we had 2 disturbance calls. One was a 5150 call, and the other was a domestic verbal, which is a husband and wife arguing. For the Strands community, we ran all of the streets within the lower Strands community. We had a total of 12 calls for service. 8 of those were false burglary alarms. That's generally the resident opening the door and forgetting that the alarm is activated. We had 1 fireworks call, 1 parking issue, and 2 citizen assists. Those 2 citizen assist calls were open gates at the lower end. Any questions on Strands?
This is just for the council. This is a receive and file, so we don't need any motions or actions unless you'd like to make one. But if
Just a question.
Yep, questions, go ahead.
What's the difference between a hazardous traffic and a non-hazardous?
Good question. So hazardous is going to be any moving violation. speeding, left turns, right turns, following too closely, anything that's actually moving related. And non-hazardous is going to be everything that's not related, meaning equipment, cell phones, things like that.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councilman Villar.
You may have covered this, Sheriff. I apologize. It's a little hard to hear. But what can you attribute the huge increase to between 2019 and 2020 when it comes to these citations?
That was a proactive effort on my part and the Sheriff's Department to make a difference in, I noticed that we were getting complaints from citizens about traffic concerns and noise complaints about loud vehicles. So that was kind of my, my push.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Thanks for putting this
Councilman Villar?
together,
Absolutely.
Captain. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Real quick, so 26 in 6 months, that doesn't seem like a lot. Is that correct? 26 in 6 months relative to other areas in the city, that doesn't necessarily strike you as a major problem area?
No, it does not. It does not.
And
I would
then-
say it's pretty average.
Okay. And I'm curious, what would be the number to catch your eye to sort of say, hey, I got to focus on this, or I got to send some folks?
I can't answer that. It's also, it's going to depend on what is going on in the parking lot. Obviously, if we have violent crimes going on in the parking lot, that's something that's definitely going to raise my attention. I unfortunately, I'd love to have a deputy sit there during a whole shift. I can't, because obviously we have priority calls that take precedence over that. I can't give you a number because I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I know that it is a problem for citizens that live in that area for sure. And we are trying to make a difference. We have done some proactive things that I can't really talk about. But we are making differences that probably the public doesn't see.
Okay.
If that makes sense. But I will tell you that my deputies do drive through that area at least several times a shift because they know it is an area of concern for us.
Great. And again, I suppose from a council perspective, I can keep stressing the importance of calling in, even if they think it won't necessarily get fixed, that particular issue.
100%. If we don't know about it, we can't act on it. And even if it's 5 times a day, the same person calling, that's what we're here for. That's our job.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I did want to highlight one pretty fantastic case that happened back on December 11th of 2020. Deputy Madera stopped a vehicle for expired registration, and this is just a proactive stop. This wasn't anyone that called. This is just a good cop doing good police work. Upon further investigation, the 2 male passengers were in possession of 2 loaded firearms and a large amount of narcotics. Because of that deputy's tenacity, those guns and narcotics are off of our streets of Dana Point. So I always like to highlight great things that our staff are doing. And that is the conclusion of my report.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Mr. City Manager, nothing to add on that?
Well, I want to mention something regarding Strand's parking lot. So since Councilmember Frost brought that up at the December meeting, wanted us to take a look at it and do a report. I had driven through there many times the last month and a half, and also took a look at random looks at video in the evenings. And every time I drove through the parking lot in the evenings, there's always a group out there, usually, somewhere between 4 and 12 kids. I'll say kids under 25, and never once saw them doing anything. I had checked with a couple of the deputies as well that have been doing some of the proactive patrols. It's not visible, but then you do see social media posts of somebody doing donuts in their Mazda Miata and those types of things. And like Captain Monteleone said, it's kind of hard to have somebody down there all the time. And we just want to encourage residents to call when you see something that's wrong. Call, because it does bring us awareness to us of issues, and they'll get a deputy out there.
Thank you, Mr. Killebrew. And that was a receive and file, so I think we can move on. No one has any more on that item? Is that correct? All right, thank you. Madam City Clerk, do we have any public comment?
No, Mr. Mayor, we do not.
All right, and I think I can forego instructions on public comment, and that brings us to council reports, including any city-related meetings attended. Mr. Frost, do you have anything to report?
I turned in my meetings to the clerk.
Thank you. Mr. Villar, do you have anything to report?
I turned in my meeting.
Mr. Ksorik?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have anything to report, but I did not turn in my meetings. I will turn them in after the meeting.
Mayor Pro Tem Miller?
Thank you. Had a kind of an exciting month. I was fortunate enough to be appointed by the OC Parks as the new chair of the OC Parks Commission. Last weekend at TCA, I was elected vice president of the Foothill Eastern, which is the 241 toll road. It's an interesting time. It's going to be a good year. It's a lot of interesting things going on in parks right now. One of the things we're talking about, we haven't done it at parks yet, but it's something I'm going to agendize, is we have a lot of mitigated space in Orange County, and it's due to road construction. OCTA has a lot of mitigated space. TCA has a lot of mitigated areas, and it's very expensive to maintain those. It's not something that, OCTA and TCA is not in the business of maintaining mitigated areas. We use a lot of contractors to do that. And it has always made sense to me that we should be partnering with OC Parks on this. Some of these areas have issues with how they were entitled, and there's not any public access allowed on these other than a couple docent-led tours every once in a while, or a couple times a year. But it's something we're going to look at. Can these agencies come together and get a little bit closer and see if OC Parks can take this over? The maintenance, the management of it, and hopefully once we can start down that path, we can maybe open some of these areas up to the public so we can actually enjoy those areas and see what California looked like before the invasive species came in, and let our residents enjoy it. Other than that, I have nothing else, and I have turned in my list of meetings.
Thank you. And I have turned in my list of meetings. I do not have anything to report from those this week. We have no public hearings tonight. We have no unfinished business tonight. So that moves us to agenda item number 14, strategic plan review and performance measures. Mr. City Manager, do you have a staff report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we do have a staff report. I'm going to turn it over for the PowerPoint discussion first, and then open up the floor for Q&A. So Kelly Renders will provide the report.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Here we start off with our vision slide of vibrant world-class place. We'll move on to our mission. While 2020 was challenging, we still remained focused on our mission. Even in the midst of the pandemic, our staff has continued to strive to provide all of our services to the community. We were one of the first to reopen City Hall to the public safely. And obviously we've installed a lot of protective measures, plexiglass, PPE, modified distanced workspaces, outside meeting tables, enhanced cleaning, and have really worked to continue our mission in a safe manner here at the city. And while all of our services and activities happened not all of our services and activities happened this year, we continue to look for ways to get things done, pivot, and think outside the box. And that goes along with our values. So now we'll start talking about where our metrics are with our goals. We'll start with crime, and part 1 is slightly up and part 2 is slightly down. Although you can see in contrast to 2018, our deputies continue to be more active in issuing citations in this space, and in fact keeping pace fairly steady even through the pandemic. And so you'll also notice that response times have also improved. While people were theoretically maybe driving less in 2020, we had slightly more motor vehicle accidents. Code enforcement was also really active this year and continued to work diligently, resolving matters with initial contact, even improving over last year's numbers. So we'll go on to goal 2. And I'm just hitting kind of some of the highlights for you. Obviously, we're not able to run our trolleys this year. The only weekend that we were able to run our trolleys was the first weekend of Festival of Wales in 2020. So you'll obviously see the numbers there. Graffiti removal, on the other hand, was absolutely A+, and our claims were down this year. I would tell you that this year was incredibly challenging for employees. Normal training programs were canceled or went online. Working remotely was introduced. Employees had alternate office spaces to physically distance in the buildings, but all came through with great attitudes and continued productivity, which is shown in the 75% exceptional reviews versus 60% a year ago. As you all know, Mike has been pulling double duty since Mark's departure and has been the epitome of this goal, fiscally responsible and accountable. The budget has been a constant moving target as our economy, and in particular our hotels and restaurants, have been at the forefront of very challenging and ever-changing health orders, stay-at-home orders, and other state and local mandates. Mike has continued to hold the ship steady, and with the support and direction of the City Council, the FRC, and staff. So thank you, Mike, and we're looking in good shape here. On to goal 4. Ozone treatment at Salt Creek stayed relatively steady. Beach postings were up slightly, 12.4 are for Doheny and 3.8 for Baby Beach, making up the 17.23, both higher than last year, and this is really due to dog and avian bacteria. Electricity use is flat. The gasoline tracking system changed last year, so comparisons will be made on a go-forward basis. Less rain in 2020 drove our water usage up to keep our parks in good condition. Recycling was a little more challenging this year as CR&R temporarily suspended all recycling operations at their materials recovery facilities in March. There was concern about hand sorting the commingled waste. This impacted their ability to divert waste from the landfill. They also canceled 2 of their collection events that we normally hold here in town. And then obviously our public workshops and community education programs were challenged this year. The NIC was closed temporarily. School visits were obviously greatly impacted. And on to goal 5, planning and building continued to work hard to get the majority of applications processed timely, and 84% of the building permits pulled were completed. As you can see, their customer service was awesome. Dana Point's commercial real estate market is pretty tight, not a tremendous amount of inventory in town. Unemployment is slightly up, as expected with the economic impacts of the pandemic, and hotel occupancy has hovered around 50%. The next slide is really just a reference back to the community survey that was done in December of 2018 for your information. And that concludes my report on the strategic plan metrics. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it from staff? All right.
So
Mr.
if I
City
could,
Manager.
this would tip in a typical year, absent COVID, this would have been a point in time where we would have been talking about a community survey that would have been done this past fall that we decided not to do given everything else that's going on. And this would have been an opportunity really to kind of dig into the strategic plan and take a look at, the long-term financial plan. And at this point in time, my recommendation is we just kind of hunker down and stay the course. You're going to hear that on the next agenda item regarding the budget update. Staff has been challenged to keep the doors open and all of our processes operating, given all the changes and, sending people home to telecommute, figuring all that out, bringing them back, figuring out how to have visitors in our lobby to pull building permits and submit plans, to then with the uptick last month again in COVID, again pushing staff back out, doing alternating weeks with staff telecommuting so that we don't have the whole department or any one function where there's multiple bodies that do the same job together at one time. So if somebody goes out and has to quarantine, which we've had a lot of those happen, thankfully, none of it I identified happening in the workplace, but as with a lot of other businesses, you're seeing the spread of COVID happening in people's non-work lives. So our staff's been great about identifying those issues and quarantining. So I guess I'm apologizing here for not being ready to discuss any changes or tweaks to the strategic plan at this time, but I frankly don't think that we're in a in a position, given COVID and what we're faced with in the coming months here, to really have had a worthwhile discussion. But I think that we always have to be looking at the strategic plan, looking at our goals, and looking at our performance measures. I look through all these performance measures, and it doesn't surprise me that I think staff's done an incredible job this year, given everything that we've been facing. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the council. If you guys have anything that you want us to look at or work toward amending in the strategic plan, let's have those. This is the start of those discussions. I'll go through the budget calendar in the next agenda item, but at the end of this budget cycle in June, when you go to adopt the next 2-year budget, would be the typical time you would be accepting the long-term financial plan, any final changes to the strategic plan, and also adopting the budget. So we're in a unique time right now, but we're still working really hard. So with that, we're available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Normally what I would do here is go around the horn and let any of the council members ask questions of the staff or make comments. Before I do that, though, I'm going to make a motion. And you heard Mr. Killebrew say that, normal, if not for COVID, this year we would be updating this strategic plan, which is 2.5 years old now. And we would be using that strategic plan and the resident survey that helped inform it to then help inform the long-term financial plan, because strategic plans are all about resourcing. We say what our important strategic goals are, and then we find ways to resource those. Because of COVID last year, we didn't do this, which is review the strategic plan in detail. But I'm going to make a motion that we create an ad hoc committee of 2 council members and whatever staff are necessary based on the city manager's discretion to go through the strategic plan in detail, figure out which measures work and don't work for the staff, which goals may have already been met, which goals might be missing. And the reason I'm bringing this motion now is because then council members, if this passes, your comments can become direction to that committee so that they can go and nug out those details. So my motion is to create an ad hoc committee, basically a task force, time certain that it's dissolved when the strategic plan is updated, to work out the details of an updated strategic plan.
I'm assuming you're talking about 2 council members.
Yes, 2 council members.
Okay, I'll second it.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion or debate on that? Mr. Victoric, looks like you want to weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes. Council Member Villar, we'll get you after Council Member Victoric.
Sorry.
No worries.
I just have one question. It always comes up whenever there's a proposal or a suggestion to create committees and sit down with staff time. We always have to be conscious of staff's other responsibilities and the time that would have to go into this. So I want to ask the question. I'll ask the city manager if, I don't know if you were aware of this or have any thoughts about the feasibility and what the requirements on the staff would be if we did this.
First, given the importance of the strategic plan and those goals, and looking forward, I think it's a great idea to spend time continuously looking at it. And, in the next couple months here, 2 months maybe, I think we would be very challenged with kicking off a bunch of meetings. But I did have this discussion with the mayor, and I think it'd be a good idea to move forward with a task force to take a look at it. And I would be bringing in different staff at different times for their relevant pieces of this. And I think it's achievable, even given everything else that's going on. I do think it's a good idea.
Okay, thanks. Councilmember Villar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I only caught half of what you were saying. When you were making your motion, I didn't hear any of the explanation I do apologize. It's really cutting in and out. Could you just summarize the motion again, just succinctly? I don't need all that much detail.
Certainly.
Yeah,
In the interest of making sure that I was clear for everyone else, maybe the city clerk could read the motion.
I'd be happy to, Mr. Mayor. A motion was made by Mayor Federico, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Miller, to create an ad hoc committee with 2 council members and possibly staff, which is a committee / task force to basically update the strategic plan. Thank you.
That is accurate as as I meant it. So thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilmember Villar, did you hear that?
I did. Thank you so much for repeating that. I appreciate it.
Sure. While you have the floor, do you have any questions or comments about that motion?
No questions. Thank you.
Any others? Then, Madam Clerk, we can call for the vote.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to. Councilmember Frost.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vixoric.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Villar.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Federico.
Aye.
Thank you. That's consensus.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The business of staffing that, I would volunteer to serve on it. I guess we could ask for other volunteers or nominations. How would we like to do that?
Mr. Mayor, my recommendation would be that 3 of us, we've gone through this before and we see it. We know how the process works. We have 2 brand new council members here, and I would recommend that one of them be on it. And, you know, I don't know if Councilmember Villar or Frost would want to volunteer for that, but I'd be open to either one of them.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Of course.
I actually have not been through it. It was adopted before I got here, but I
forgot about that.
I do have significant experience in doing these things and would be happy to. And I've been living with this plan. So we have me and Councilmember Frost volunteering. Do we have any other?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'd like to be on that as well for the reason why Mayor Pro Tem Miller said I think it'd be a good experience for me.
Okay. Well,
So if you have room for 3, I'd like to be on there.
we cannot do 3 because of the Brown Act, unfortunately. So you could withdraw if you don't mind, or we'd have to have a vote.
No, I'm fine removing myself. That's fine.
And for what it's worth, we will bring this. This will come back to the city council. Certainly, this ad hoc committee will do the pencil grinding legwork and bring recommendations back to the city council. Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
I've got a question for council. When this is going on, there's only 2 members of the council that are on this ad hoc. Is there a process for the other 3 members to give input through the city manager or what we were looking at so that can be discussed? Is that can we do that, or do we have to wait till it comes back to a council meeting?
Well, on any issue, when you have your regular briefings with the city manager, you can share your thoughts and concerns. So to the degree that you have any specific concerns that you would like staff to look at on this or any issue, you can share with the city manager. And then when it comes back to the council as a whole, then you'll have an opportunity to weigh in further. And if you want, whatever your comments were refined better, that's the opportunity.
Okay, I was just concerned because Councilmember Villar does want to participate, and that's a way for each of us to work with staff. And then when they go to their meetings, they're well aware of what other members' concerns are.
Yeah, I think especially on something like the strategic plan that as part of the learning process, for a new council member, I would expect that the city manager will be spending a lot of time talking about this with Councilmember Villar and Councilmember Frost in any event, more so than he might with the council members who've been here for a while.
All right, thank you.
All right, so I think it's consensus as we have 2 volunteers for the 2 positions that myself and council member Frost will serve on that and work with the city manager and the staff as necessary to update that and bring that back. So I wanted to get that done up front. So now we actually have an opportunity here at a public agendized meeting, Mayor Pro Tem Miller, that if council members have any questions for the staff or would like to give direction to that committee before it even gets up and running, please feel free if anyone has anything. Mr. Frost, anything? No? Mr. Vixoric? No? Mr. Villar?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, that was easy. Moving on to agenda item number 15. The long-term financial plan and infrastructure asset inventory update and budget priorities discussion. Mr. City Manager, I know this one's yours.
Yes. So I already gave away some of the flair of this one on some of my comments on the last item, but go ahead and go through this quick slide deck here. Slide 2. Again, just reiterating what some of the projects were that are in the strategic plan and what the status are. And you'll see a lot of them have been affected, as I state at the top of that slide, that some of the efforts have been put on hold or delayed given the impacts of COVID on our operations. So I did just bold, if you will, at the end of each one of the summarized projects that are in our strategic plan, what the status is. There isn't anything in here that we're walking away from. It's just been a matter of having available resources to tackle some of these things. So if anybody's got any questions on the brief status on any of these, go ahead and chime in now. It covers pages 2 through 4. So this is a summary of all of our projects in the strategic plan. We are making progress on quite a few of them. Some of them are on hold. Some are nearing completion. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. Moving on to slide 5 really quickly. The City Council Financial Policy number 229. These are the requirements in regards to the long-term financial plan. Has to be updated annually. So I've put a draft together. I'm discussing it at a high level tonight, and I'll discuss the next steps, I believe, on the last slide, but we'll be digging into it at the Financial Review Committee and then bringing it back a couple times prior to budget adoption in June, where the City Council would also weigh in on adopting, if you will, the long-term financial plan. Going on to slide 6, just a quick summary of what we see right now as the impacts from COVID on our 2 major revenues. There are other impacts on revenues, nothing near to the extent that you see on this slide. You'll see transient occupancy tax from last year, what we had what we had budgeted versus what we actually ended up collecting. We were upside down 2.7 million. This year, we're still projecting, even with the shutdown that happened just after Thanksgiving with I don't want to say shutdown, this extreme slowdown for our hotels. We're still looking to hit our budget, but that budget is the amended budget is 5.9 million less than what our original budget was. So I'm putting it on here that the loss is 5.9 million for this year, and next year we are anticipating a drag on our hospitality industry still, and it would be about a $1.6 million hit compared to where we think we would have otherwise been. Over the duration of those 3 years, it's 10.1 million on property tax, sales tax. A lot of it is driven by our hospitality industry as well. We're looking at a 1.9 million hit over the 3 years, the two combined, $12 million. And then just running down through the bullets on this page, everybody knows that our hospitality industry was decimated starting in March of last year into mid-June. We had a couple of the resorts open back up. Sales tax revenue has been depressed, obviously because of the lower occupancy in the hotels. However, when we closed the books last year, as reported back in September, that we did end up finishing the year only down 1.4 million compared to the amended budget. So you see 2.67 million in the chart and 500,000 in the chart for sales tax for a total of $3.2 million hit last year. But our other revenues came in better than the budget, and we kept our expenditures in check. So the net was we ended up only down 1.4 million. We had better than expected hotel occupancy from the beginning of this fiscal year in July through Thanksgiving, then mass cancellations from Thanksgiving forward. Our projections do assume little occupancy recovery through late spring. I will report today with still having a couple of hotels to collect their revenue for December that my updated projections that are in here are a little bit under what we actually collected. So we're still hitting even all of my updated projections when everything shut down in early December. We're still doing a little bit better. Slide 7 is a quick summary of the vast amount of relief we received, 1.1 million. That's all we've got plugged into this entire plan. That's money that's certain for us that we have received or confident that we were going to receive in the case of FEMA. So the $12 million in losses that you see, all I have plugged into these financial projections is the 1.1 million. Congress is now or will be discussing additional COVID financial relief that could come to local governments. However, I don't have any money plugged into these projections. That'll be good news if it shows up. And just a quick reminder, I wrote this last year when we were in the midst of figuring out the impacts of COVID last May. That just to be clear, staff is guided in designing our path forward using all the financial policies that the city council's put together the last couple of years. And I think I strongly believe they are serving us well at this point and will continue to. Slide 8, the great reveal at the high level for our general fund. You'll see the big hit in FY20 and FY21 that we took. We are looking out at FY23 to be much improved. The idea here, the assumption is that COVID will be mostly behind us and our hospitality industry will rebound, but not to the level where we think they would have been prior to the pandemic. Getting into some of the details on slide 9, given our dependence on the hospitality industry, I had mentioned earlier, little occupancy recovery from the downturn last month until late spring. Our next year projection at this point in time is for 11.5 million. That's a 65% increase over this year, which is severely depressed given the impact on COVID over a full year. But it's still not back to where we thought where we had been projecting we would be without the pandemic. FY24 and beyond have very limited growth as an assumption, just to be conservative. We do have beyond the next 2-year budget in the long-term financial plan, the Wave Hotel and the new Harbor Hotel coming online, but we're looking out at FY25, FY26, and I do not have anything in these projections regarding the Headlands Hotel that is entitled already. It's already zoned for that use. The Cannons Hotel that's at the Coastal Commission at this point, nor the Cove Road site, which is also at the Coastal Commission. So I do not, if those come in, they help our bottom line. Otherwise, at this point, I don't think they're far enough along to actually put numbers in. For FY22 sales tax, seeing a 13.75 rebound, that sounds like it's huge, but it's based off of what happened last year and into this year with our sales tax. And then we'd see another continuing rebound with the return again of our hospitality industry in FY23 at 6%, but then going conservative in the out years at 1 to 3% growth. And we do know that with the rebuild of the harbor, there will be, I will not be surprised, nor should you, if those growth projections in the out years are greater than 1 to 3%. Property tax has been solid. The assessed valuation that the state just put out last month for assessed values January 1, the growth rate that go into effect for your property tax bills you pay this coming December and into next April, they were only at like 1.1% on the base growth, but we've got so much activity going on with property sales, particularly in Monarch Bay, that I'm very confident that we're going to still achieve the property tax growth rates. And then development activity has been still off the charts. It's assumed to be steady in the coming years, but again, I've been doing this for 6 years now, declining back to what had been a normal level of investment in prior years. But I'm wrong every year, and I'm happy to be wrong on those growth rates. On expenses on slide 10, sheriff's contract growth, go back over 10 years now, it's 4% a year. I'm plugging that in at 4% a year. I know the county's under extreme financial strain at this point in time too because of COVID. So I believe that the sheriff's contract growth rate will be kept in check. And I think 4% is conservative. Personnel cost growth, those are all of our personnel costs. I've plugged in 3%. And then the final, just to point out though, that there is a final phase in that took place over 3 years coming up on July 1st, where employees will be paying additional 0.75% for now a combined total 2% toward their employee pension and our unfunded liability. So there'll be an additional pickup on top of the 7% the employees already pay. So now they'll be paying a total of 9% of their wages toward the pension liability. Unfunded pension liability payments have been updated in our projections based on the latest actuarial studies. There's no consideration yet in these projections for the use of the $4 million that the council set aside, the remaining $4 million that the council set aside in a unfunded liability for an unfunded liability investment, if you will, to reduce our unfunded liability. But I do want to point out in these projections that in FY24, I've got replenishing the $1 million that we borrowed last year to help deal with the COVID impacts. And an additional 500,000, I think, in FY25, also going into this account. So this will be a discussion. It's still at the Financial Review Committee level. We will be taking this on again, looking at the right time to possibly invest in what's known as a Section 115 trust, as opposed to paying directly to our pension plan to pay down the unfunded liability. Also included in our modeling are 2 different cost growth measures that I put in almost every single line item just because costs go up. I don't know how much necessarily any individual line item will go up, but I put CPI in it at 3%. And for other items, I've got a general cost increase of 1.75%. Probably one of the most important things to me in this whole effort and in satisfying some of the council's financial policies is that we do have full funding for the duration of the long-term financial plan for our capital program, that it does include funding coming from the general fund. Moving on to slide 11, talking about risks. Obviously, transient occupancy tax is always going to be a risk for us. We see what happens with the hospitality industry back during the Great Recession, obviously with COVID. Trying to pick when the impacts from COVID lessen and then go away is an impossible task at this point in time. But I've had a lot of discussions with the hoteliers about their outlooks and reading industry information, and I feel confident that what we have is the best we can put together at this point in time. Short-term rental transient occupancy tax, the regulations are currently in discussions at the Planning Commission level. We'll be coming back to the City Council. Just want to keep it top of mind that is $700,000 a year plugged into the pro formas here. And then delays in some of the new hotels is a risk, so I've got them out beyond the 2-year budget. But if those are delayed, then the long-term projections would obviously change. Again, property tax and in lieu property tax are solid. We are introducing into this upcoming budget cycle what we had on our projects, unfunded projects list regarding storm drains. So we're asking to put some money in here to update our storm drain master plan, and also to put some money into the budget to actually do the design work for a couple of projects. And then we've got plugged in some pretty big slugs of money starting in FY24 and 25 to address some of our storm drain work that needs to be done. Trolley grants a risk, Project V, what is it called, Matt? Project V. Right now, it's set to expire in fiscal year 25. If it gets extended, that'll be awesome. I believe we've got enough match money. If it does get extended through 27, we will have enough match money from non-general funds. The Project B pays for about 85% of the trolley operating costs each year, and then the city has to come up with match money. We've been using other available funds that weren't from the general fund, but those funds will dry up beyond this next 2-year budget, but close to the end of this long-term financial plan. So I'm just keeping it on the radar. We do not have the cost estimates yet for the allocations to all the contract cities for the sheriff's body-worn cameras that we understand they're working on, and may actually be deploying them possibly next calendar year. So we will see shortly if we get a bill, what the bill is going to be for that. I do want to point out, this is the page that helps me sleep at night right now, that we do have other funds. We don't want to use them, but that we could turn to that aren't restricted by any outside rules. These are council designated accounts, but you can add them up. We've got quite a bit of money set aside to do some really nice stuff that we don't want to spend, but we do have this money if we ever have to turn to it in the near term. No plans to do that though. Then going on to slide 13 and 14 show the impacts on, or the status of our council reserves, council designated reserves. We've got economic stability, extreme event, then the unassigned fund balance. There's a fund balance policy that is the middle column for next year based on the numbers I have. And what I'm proposing next year at this point in time is to continue to use economic stability reserve, keep the extreme event reserve intact, and fully fund the unassigned amount. Note that the proposed FY22 balance at this point in time, and this is a draft proposed, I'm not actually going to give you the proposed budget until early April, but this would take the reserve down to 41% of the maximum amount of the amount established by policy. Right now it's at 51% because we did draw down on some of it to help balance this year's COVID economic impact. The first, any surpluses that we do achieve though go first to replenish these by policy. Not included in my projections are estimates to close this year on both revenues and expenses. So the assumption is we're going to get the revenues that we have budgeted, and we're going to spend every dime of the expenditures we have budgeted. The reality is that's not going to happen. We will have a surplus. It will factor into lowering the ask on the economic stability reserve. I'm just not willing to say that we're going to hit all of our revenue numbers at this point in time, nor that something's not going to happen, that we don't have to spend all of the budget. But the Sheriff's Department right now, given everything they've been dealing with in regards to staffing, we have seen quite a bit of savings regarding using deputies on overtime as opposed to having a position staffed. So we do have quite a bit of savings versus our contract that we will get before we close this year's books. Anyway, so we're in good shape. And then you look at FY23, Again, not taking into account any surplus that may occur from this year. The ask would be that we use 600,000 of the economic stability to help balance the FY23 budget. If we do achieve $1 million surplus from FY22, then this would be fully funded and the unassigned fund balance would grow above the 7% that we have set here. So again, the picture here is that, you know, the trends over the life of this long-term financial plan are that in essence, the revenue and expenditure lines are in balance at this point in time. And I'm recommending that we hold the course that we've been on since last May. And if all the assumptions come true, even absent any additional financial relief regarding COVID from federal or state governments, I believe we'll weather the storm in sound financial shape. So I'm not going to read everything on this last slide. I do want to, before I summarize it, I do want to point out that, and I don't have this on the slide itself, included in the staff report is an attachment regarding the city's infrastructure asset inventory update, and attachment B to that lists out all the proposed projects going out actually a year beyond this long-term financial plan, and also the funding sources that are in play. And every one of the funding sources, those budgets for the projected years are including drawing money off of general fund, gas tax, Measure M. So those are all plugged into the long-term financial plan as well. And that fully funds the capital program through FY27. So these are all the dates and all the opportunities for discussion. The long-term financial plan itself is about a 45-page document. I will be dropping that on the Financial Review Committee, but also making it available to the public. We will have a couple meetings to discuss it. We will have discussions on budget priorities on the upcoming meetings. Again, opportunities, anything the council wants to introduce into the budget. We've got a mid-year financial report. Again, a formal long-term financial plan presentation. So this one dialed in after input from the Financial Review Committee and any other updates we might have. And then you roll through all the way to the bottom and we'd be looking to adopt a budget after a couple formal budget workshops, possibly the first meeting in June, on June 1st, and or have discussions at that meeting, and then have another hearing on the second meeting on the 15th of June to adopt the next 2-year budget. And with that, myself and staff are available for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Killebrew. Last slide. Next week, a week from today, the Financial Review Committee will be meeting. So if you have direction that you want to give to the Financial Review Committee to look at something that you saw in here in more detail, or make any deviations from the directions we've already given to staff, that you can certainly do that. We don't need any action tonight unless we wanted to deviate from the pretty clear direction we've given to staff. And it's obvious that staff has taken and worked into the plan, which is continue to minimize the expenditures until such time as the revenues come back. And when they do, we follow our policies and resupply our reserve funds. So that's my big takeaway from that, is that Mr. Killebrew's been following our policies to a T. So I really don't have any direction, but we'll go to you, Mayor Pro Tem Miller, next if you do, or questions, go for
Thank
it.
you. I have a couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I guess this might be for Mr. Sinacore. We talked about the traffic signals that we own in town, right, in the city. And I know that OCTA has a traffic light synchronization program going on, and I know that Dana Point was part of that this year. What's our progress on that?
Good evening, Council. The progress is we're still waiting for OCTA to make a determination on who's going to be eligible for funding. As soon as we know, we'll report back to the Council.
I thought OCTA had already made the decision that Dana Point was going to be part of that.
I have not been notified at this time.
All right,
But I certainly can check into it.
I'll check on it. I've got a meeting next week with them. So And then one of the other things we talked about is, we are talking about is the federal funding due to COVID. And I sit on League of Cities. One of the things we showed how little we received as a city due to how the funds were distributed. The majority of those funds went to cities of 300,000 or larger. Smaller cities like Dana Point were kind of left out in the cold. And that was a big issue. We had our League of Cities. I sit on Revenue and Taxation Policy Committee. We had our meeting last Friday. And one of the things we discussed is distribution of those funds and finding a different way to do that. And for those of you who don't know who the League of Cities are, 98% of the cities in the state of California belong to it. It's a big lobby group where the cities come together. We set up our policies for the year, what direction is in our priorities. And one of the things we talked about is, and I'll bring this up so staff is aware, how they are going to allocate those funds this time. And we talked about a qualified process. I don't know exactly what that meant, other than what I asked a specific issue for Dana Point is how our tourism industry has been decimated from this and what it's done to our revenue for the year. Because they were pushing towards actual COVID cases in your city. Well, a smaller city like Dana Point is not going to have the same number of COVID cases that a larger city like Los Angeles is going to have. So I said, COVID has decimated it because we can't get people into our city. You can't travel. And so they're pushing on, if we can't go back and look at all of our TOT revenues over the last couple of years, we can actually make the case that this is what we've lost, which you did right here, which was fantastic. So we have the information, and then submit it that way. And hopefully our voice will be heard in Sacramento, and they'll reallocate how they do that. If not, the other issue is going to be, it's going to be based on population, and every person will get, every resident will be allocated the same amount of money, which will actually help us up, I think, because we actually did not do well compared to the other cities. So it's one thing. In Project V, that's our transportations committee over at OCTA. I'm not sure where that is right now. There was a brief discussion, I know, about will we extend it, because we didn't really need the funds this year because none of those trolleys were working. And so hopefully that'll be moving forward. So we'll continue in the future. So those are just a couple statements I had, and the question for Mr. Senatore. And I am going to follow up at OCTA because I thought that decision was made. But thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Miller. Councilmember Exor, do you have any?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say I always commend the staff, and especially Mr. Kilbrew, for the work he does on the budget. I know how much effort and time goes into it, and I do agree that our financial policies that we have in place have served us well. So I don't really have anything specific to add, but I will be interested to see the Financial Review Committee. They'll take a crack at it, and I'll be looking forward to see what they come back with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Frost, any questions or comments?
Mike, City Manager Mike Kilbrew looks really good. Curious on the personnel side, 3% growth. Does that include sort of the rehires to get staff level back up? And at what point would that happen? Or are you going to do two roles forever?
No, I'm not going to do two roles forever. The model right now includes the base level staffing that we have this year, which would include a finance director, not an assistant city manager finance director, but a finance director. So there would be savings there, and the other positions would be filled. We've been running vacant on a maintenance worker position since the staff member left the city a couple months ago. We would plan on hiring them back shortly after the budget's adopted, assuming it's still in there. And we've got an analyst position that we've been running down a position, and a administrative assistant position. So we've got quite a few vacancies. This plan would assume filling all those, but we'll be pretty nimble. If we get other vacancies, we'll always look for some savings. But at this point in time, I don't plan on doing both jobs forever. So thank you for asking, though.
Councilmember Villar.
No, sir, I don't have any questions or comments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. That closes out all of our new business. Brings us to staff reports from the city staff. Mr. Oh, I'm sorry.
One
I'm
more.
wishful thinking, although this one should be a simple one. Item number 16. Thank you. Item number 16 is city council appointments. See, no one cares about this one. City council appointments as representatives and city commissions, so committees, subcommittees, and task forces. We probably don't have a staff report, right? No, it's
I can
okay.
do
I don't think we
I can-
need one.
I can do a brief one if you'd like.
No, Madam Clerk, I don't think we need one.
Okay,
The recommended
thank you.
action is that the city council approve the appointments to all of our subcommittees and city representative seats around the county and different agencies, our cities and subcommittees and task forces, direct staff to take action as deemed appropriate, and adopt a resolution entitled a resolution of the City Council of the City of Dana Point, California, designating and appointing its representative to the Orange County Fire Authority's Board of Directors. I'm assuming they're the only one who asked for a resolution, Madam Clerk. Is that why we have to do that?
Actually, we've done it every year, but we don't have to if the board member doesn't change.
Oh, well, happy to do it anyway, or happy to leave it on there. We have a draft. We keep a chart here, a slate of all the appointments. Each of the council members have this, and it was added to the council agenda, posted on the website. I'm going to move all of the recommended actions and the slate of appointments as written in the draft proposal in the agenda.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second on those. And before we have any discussion, I see everyone here at the dais has a copy. Councilmember Villar, do you have a copy of that proposed slating of assignments?
I do, and I do have one comment, if it's appropriate now to talk about it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Since that's the next comments or questions, go ahead. You have the floor.
Unfortunately, as much as I would like to sit on the South Orange County Watershed Committee, I can't do it if it's meets at 2:00 in the afternoon. I apologize. I should have let you know earlier, Mr. Mayor, but that would be the only one that I see on the list that I'm on that I don't think I could actually do.
And thank you. I understand that you do have time commitments and concerns. Are there any other council members that are interested in being our representative to the South Orange County Watershed Management Area Partners Executive Committee? Meets 4 times a year at 2 p.m.
I'll do it.
Mr. Frost will do it. So, Madam Clerk, do you see that one?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'll make the change.
Okay. And I don't think we have to go through amending the motions. All right. Any other questions or comments or input from council members? I see none. Mr. Villar, do you have anything else, or was that it? Any other questions or concerns? Hearing none.
No, sir, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, yep. No, Madam Clerk, you want to call for a vote?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Frost.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Vixoric.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Villar. Are you with us? Can you hear me, Councilmember Villar?
Hi, sorry. I'm having trouble hearing you.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Miller.
Aye.
Mayor Federico.
Aye.
That's a consensus, 5-0.
Thank you. And that closes that item out. And now we are on to city staff reports. Mr. City Manager.
As everybody knows, COVID is been alive and well this last month and a half. Happy to report that your city staff made a pretty sizable contribution to the staffing efforts to get the Disneyland point of distribution, or POD, a vaccination site, up and running. Our own James Shadle has been working on the logistics team for the last 2 weeks. He's already moved on to the next super pod site that they're standing up. The county will announce it when they're ready.
He's already moved on to the next.
And we will likely be providing 1 to 2 more staff in the near term to help him stand up that super pod site. So we are doing what we can to help the county, who just found out a little over 2 weeks ago that they were tasked with distributing vaccines. So good stuff. Other than that, I don't have any other comments.
Mr. City Attorney.
I have nothing this evening.
All right, thank you very much. That brings us to adjournment. I'd like to thank all of you who joined us, remind everybody to shop local, and that the next regular meeting of the City Council will be February 2nd, 2021 at 5 p.m. The City Council Chamber, located at 33282 Golden Lantern, Suite 210, Dana Point, California. Have a good night.